From the headquarters of Talisio English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sweeney Gray. We begin in Chile, where a video has emerged showing the last few seconds of Camilo Catrillanca's life before he was assassinated. Lawyer representing the Mapuche community, Patricio Sepulveda, handed over the video as evidence to the prosecutor in Temuco. The video also shows a policeman patrolling Colipuli Road while a helicopter hovers above. The footage contradicts a statement made by the head of the police, who said that evidence of police presence in the area on that day had been destroyed. Let's hear from our correspondent, Paola Dragnich, who spoke to members of the Mapuche community about their reaction to the videos.
We were here at the Congress in Valparaiso in the middle of the port crisis when dramatic videos were released showing the exact moment when Camilo Catrillanca was murdered in the community of Tamicuicui. We are joined by Ana Yao and the AD Mapu organization. Thank you for talking to us about this new development. What is behind these videos that the police had said did not exist?
That was a lie, and they continue to undermine the family of Camilo Catrillanca. Since the beginning, his father said that Interior Minister Chadwick was wrong, that there was in fact a confrontation. It's clear that there's not only manipulation by the government, but also a criminalization of the Mapuche people. They are taking advantage of our pain. With these new videos, we once again suffer. We can't allow the state to be so racist and act like criminals against the Mapuche. They keep harassing us. But despite that, we are here fighting. We expect an answer after this Congress. The Interior Minister has to resign because he's at fault here.
The Mapuche are coming to Congress, where laws benefiting the majorities are written. They have come here to open up a dialogue. There was also a Mapuche gathering to discuss this. What are the next steps?
This was our third meeting. And we are here where the laws against Mapuche people are created. Today we demand a special session where our leaders can present our reality and with that political and historic context, listen to our demands. We reject plans that only seek the development of large companies. We have hope, but we know we can't completely trust in the political class.
Thank you. We will continue covering both fronts, the dock workers' strike and the video on the killing of Camilo Catrillanca.
And port workers in Chile are continuing their strike despite recent police repression. They're demanding their work be respected and reject the symbolic reparations proposed by the government.
Port workers have unanimously described the government's pre-agreement as a mockery.
We have reached an agreement of certain economic terms. The most important thing now is building a team to analyze the most important characteristics of port workers who are a fundamental part of the country's development.
While workers ask for the respect of the dignity of their work, the government has offered them some gift cards, a training course, and a loan, which would need to be paid back.
We have been on strike for over 30 days. This offer makes a mockery of workers.
Even if they are a part of Chile's labor law, their employment at the ports remains informal. They have no job security, no paid vacation, nor any basic right that other workers enjoy. Therefore, other workers have joined them in their fight. This strike has made a mark in Chile. It's the first time in 18 years that Valparaiso port workers have brought the port to a halt.
We will continue to mobilize, join the Valparaiso strike.
Instead of listening to their demands, President Sebastián Piñera has intensified his efforts in trying to criminalize this movement, bypassing his role as a mediator, as a guarantor of workers' rights.
Just think of all the improvements we must fight for. The strike is not for money, it's for our dignity, and we will continue fighting for it. We're fighting for our families. We will only get stronger as more people are joining our cause.
It's likely that as the new year approaches, these ports will continue to be full of striking workers, resisting a neoliberal system and demanding respect for their rights.
The government of Ecuador has condemned an audio recording which was leaked this week, which suggested that President Lenin Moreno was unwilling to negotiate with the rebel group that earlier this year kidnapped and killed 3 Ecuadorian journalists. In the audio, President Lenin Moreno can be heard saying that the integrity of the state is more important than the lives of a few people. The kidnappers had proposed to free the reporters in exchange for the release of 3 prisoners from their organization. The government says his words were taken out of context and that to reproduce the audio constitutes a crime. The Attorney General's office has begun an investigation into the matter. And labor unions are expected to lead mass protests in Ecuador over new economic policies rolled out by the government. The Lenin Moreno administration recently announced another hike in gasoline prices. 25,000 public sector jobs would also be slashed. Some critics, including Ecuador's Citizens' Revolution movement, have said that this represents a neoliberal shift in the country's policies. A national convention is also set to take place on January 19th.
We oppose to the price increases to gas. We condemn the statements of the Minister of Finance when he says that basic necessity products are not transported in vehicles which use gasolina extra and says that their price will not rise. Speculation will be generated and will in turn increase the cost of products of basic necessity in our country.
Right now, Ecuadorians are living a political crisis, an economic crisis, and a social crisis that comes as a consequence. This crisis is not being provoked by workers nor the Ecuadorian people, the least protected people. This crisis is being provoked by large business owning groups in partnerships with sections of the government. They think that once again, it is us who are responsible for creating this crisis. At no point are us workers responsible for causing this economic crisis.
In Brazil on Wednesday, the president of the Supreme Court, Dias de Foley, annulled a decision to release detainees convicted in the second instance. This means that the former President Lula and other prisoners who have not yet exhausted their appeals process will remain behind bars. Earlier, a Supreme Court judge ruled that all prisoners awaiting a judgment on their second appeal should be released. Our correspondent in Brazil, Dani Galetti, explains.
Brazil's Supreme Court president has struck down Wednesday's ruling that would have effectively freed former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva from prison. No doubt the news came as a surprise to many. We elicited the opinions of several magistrates on the issue. We also spoke with members of the Communist Party who had actually filed the appeal against the 2016 Supreme Court decision. Well, it was evident that the decision to knock down Wednesday's ruling was certainly not expected. In some quarters even, it's being viewed as a political response. On Wednesday, Justice Marco Aurelio Mayo had issued a ruling that suspended the Supreme Court decision from 2016 that actually allowed for convicts to be jailed after their sentence was upheld on first appeal. He had said that his conscience led him to that decision and that it was intended to benefit more than 169,000 people, not just the former president. After Wednesday's ruling, Lula's lawyers wasted little time filing documents they hoped would secure his release. The Workers' Party was also optimistic that Lula would enjoy this Christmas with his family as a free man. However, earlier on Thursday, the party's leader and his deputy confirmed the latest setback in the bid to secure Lula's freedom. They described the move as a blow to the Brazilian Constitution. They both say they plan to hold a vigil outside the prison where Lula will spend Christmas. This shows once more the political persecution he is suffering, they say. Lawyers say this is not politically correct, even from the Brazilian justice system, to have a former president as a political prisoner. Meanwhile, Lula's supporters are still holding out hope as the Supreme Court president says the contentious case would be heard on April 10th next year.
And Brazil's current president, Michel Temer, has been charged for alleged corruption and money laundering by the country's general prosecutor. An investigation against Temer revealed that he had taken bribes from companies in exchange for the extension of 2 government port contracts. Among these was Rodrimar, a shipping and logistics company, which is believed to have paid bribes to Temer amounting to almost $8 million. Temer can only be tried as president if Brazil's lower house of Congress votes to allow a trial to proceed, which is unlikely to happen before he leaves office on January 1st. We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. The government of Venezuela has announced the expulsion of Juan Carlos Perez Villamizar, a non-accredited Colombian consular officer. Venezuela's government has said that he was functioning in the country without proper accreditation in open violation of international conventions. This follows what the government has referred to as the arbitrary expulsion by Colombian authorities of the Venezuelan citizen Carlos Pino. Pino was an official of the Venezuelan embassy in Bogota and was, quote, kidnapped by Colombian authorities and arbitrarily expelled. And the Venezuelan people have once again rejected the aggressive policies of the U.S., which aims to harm Venezuela's peace and economic stability.
U.S. pressure on Venezuela has intensified over the last couple of months. Economic strangulation, magnicide, and destruction are all part of U.S. plans that want to diminish peace.
How can they mess with Venezuela? Venezuela is a country which is not colonialist. It's a country which isn't expansionist. It's a country that is respectful, a country of peace, and a socialist country.
Those are the words of the people who are against the interventionist attitudes of U.S. President Donald Trump in his attempt to distort the production of food, medicine, and basic goods for the people of Venezuela.
We are celebrating Christmas, and they want to take that away from us with the sanctions and the economic and financial blockade, also the social and political blockade. That's what they want. They don't want Nicolas Maduro to swear in on January 10th.
Analysts warn of a new military aggression against Venezuela.
The United States takes advantage of its hegemonic position and threatens other countries. A little over 80% of its commercial transactions are done with U.S. dollars. The dollar has turned into a tool of dominance, of pressure on other countries, and therefore threatens any country that can have some type of relationship with Venezuela.
The National Constituent Assembly of Venezuela is in favor of approving an accord that ratifies dialogue to consolidate the future of Venezuela, respecting the laws, the Constitution, as well as democracy.
A judge in Argentina has decided to include pre-trial detention in the corruption case against the former president, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. The process against Fernandez began in September when she was accused of receiving millions of dollars in bribes. As a senator, she enjoys immunity from arrest, and she has condemned the allegations as political persecution. The case also includes the former planning minister, Julio de Vido.
Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. Juráis la patria, por Dios y estos santos.
And Argentina's indigenous activist Milagro Sala has rejected the public prosecutor's request for a 12-year prison term for her alleged crimes. She is currently facing a 4th trial for attempted murder. She's accused of trying to hire a hitman to kill a neighborhood leader. Sala has also faced a slew of corruption charges and could face a combined total of 40 years in jail on all of the charges. However, social organizations claim the cases against her amount to political persecution. And Argentina's Congress has turned into law a project that seeks to teach public officials about gender issues. It's known as the Michaela Law, taking the name of a child who was murdered due to gender-based violence last year.
During a week that was marked by various accusations of sexual abuse in work, family, and military situations, Lawmakers gave in to social pressure and turned into law a proposal that asks that all state workers must take yearly classes about gender violence, no matter their rank.
This has been a week marked by countless testimonies of sexual abuse. We have heard from a lot of adults who were abused in their childhood, and I think this starts a paradigm shift in all the government's power, so we must keep up.
The so-called Michaela Law proposes the creation of a permanent national program of institutional training on gender and violence against women, with the goal of informing all public officials about how to recognize and deal with gender violence.
We don't need any more laws. We need to provide proper training to learn and understand a new language and how to properly treat such a sensible subject, compromising to take this work seriously.
In light of multiple complaints of sexual abuse, judges, prosecutors, and judicial workers met to discuss about practices and processes that guarantee justice with gender perspective. They also talked about several complaints of sexual abuse.
We have to be willing to receive training in gender perspectives. We have to start an investigation, because if you don't do the research, you may lose testimonies, and above all, you lose the victim's trust.
Feminist organizations have once again raised their voice to encourage women to report any abuse they have suffered. Also, they demand that convictions be given out as an example and ask for integral protection to prevent, sanction, and eradicate violence against women.
Paraguay's government has called for talks with indigenous communities and farming organizations who say they are being displaced from their lands to make way for soy monoculture farming. The government called on these organizations to sit down and talk in order to find a solution to the issue. Authorities say they want to find ways to help those most vulnerable. Ongoing protests by the Takura Rai community in the department of Canindeyu are demanding the return of their lands and justice for the murdered indigenous leader Isidro Barrios.
According to the resolution of the Rural Welfare Institute dating back in 1981, 1,000 hectares of this land belong to us, as Tacuaray. The National Institute of Rural Development and Lands has the file that says this: we want to clear up this situation and we want our lands back.
In Cuba, 50% of the proposals in the new draft constitution were approved during the popular consultation period. Homer Acosta, the secretary of the Cuba State Council, reported this Thursday that 4,809 proposals were accepted and will be reflected in the new constitution. However, Acosta said that the fact that the criteria has been accepted does not necessarily mean that it is a reflection in the document and that it's going to be exact. If the Assembly supports the bill, the State Council will call a popular referendum, which will be held in February, that will decide whether or not to approve the bill. Nicaraguan Foreign Minister Dennis Moncada has announced a temporary stop to the operations of the Interamerican Commission on Human Rights in the country. He condemned their attempts at interference and their lack of respect for the country's sovereignty. Two other groups backed by the Organization of American States are also temporarily ceasing operations.
This temporary suspension of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, MECENI, and the interdisciplinary group of independent experts will last until the conditions are restored to respect our sovereignty and end interference in Nicaragua's internal matters.
We deeply regret the decision by the government. Surely in Washington they will regret receiving this information. We deeply regret not being able to meet the foreign minister and to go get feedback on our work, which would have helped both sides better understand each other's positions.
Mexican authorities are investigating the deaths of 2 Honduran teenagers who were stabbed over the weekend. The victims were reportedly between the ages of 16 and 17 and were part of the migrant caravan. Their injuries were consistent with a knife attack and strangulation. According to an initial investigation, the victims and their assailants had spoken about trading money for sex. The Honduran ambassador confirmed that the victims had joined the caravan back in October. And Mexico has agreed to a U.S. proposal to let third-country migrants remain in or be returned to Mexico while their U.S. asylum claims proceed. The term refers to migrants who are applying for visas in countries outside of their homeland in order to go to another destination, where they hope to secure asylum. In this case, non-Mexican asylum seekers are being allowed to process their entry visas to the United States while in Mexico. The decision is seen as a historic step, as Mexico has, until now, refused to accept the return of migrants who are not Mexican. Meanwhile, Mexico's government says the move is a temporary humanitarian measure. And the Mexican government has announced a new migration project that will focus on respecting human rights and social development. It will work in accordance with the recently adopted United Nations Migration Pact.
As a project based on respect to human rights, non-criminalization of migrants, and the development of southern Mexico and Central America, a 6-year program for migration was presented by the new government of Mexico.
The nature itself of migration as a phenomenon is forcing us to take a wider approach to migration policy. This is not a thing that comes from a single area. It's a state initiative.
The plan, according to the Foreign Affairs Secretary, represents an effort to look after all migrants.
After the triumph of the revolution in Cuba, childhood has taken on an unparalleled social space. Documentaries Telesur presents a children's theater company opens a window for the participation of the little ones. La Colmenita, Sons and Dreams. Premiere Sunday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin held an annual news conference on Thursday to talk about the country's economic progress and future plans. Speaking on geopolitics, Putin says he largely agrees with U.S. President Donald Trump that the Islamic State has been defeated, but he expressed doubts over whether the U.S. will fully withdraw from Syria. He took questions from journalists on subjects ranging from the country's economic growth to its nuclear program.
If we won't change the structure of the economy, we won't be able to achieve a GDP growth required for this breakthrough. The national projects are focused on it. Enormous resources will be invested. The government looks forward to changing the structure and bringing forth innovation. Then growth will be increased, as other opportunities for development will appear.
And our correspondent Hansel Ora was there, and he has this report.
The annual press conference with President Vladimir Putin took place today with nearly 2,000 journalists in attendance. At this press conference, various topics were discussed regarding international relations, including the ongoing tension. Topics were discussed such as Russia's economic growth that this year alone has seen a 4% growth, Russia's technology development, and specifically the use of the cryptocurrency and blockchain, which can pose an alternative to help alleviate the effects of U.S. sanctions. Back to you at the studio.
Thousands of commuters were left stranded when taxi drivers in South Korea walked off the job and held a mass rally to protest against a carpooling service. The demonstration comes just days after the death of a taxi driver who set himself on fire in protest against the planned launch of the carpooling service called Kakao. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at teleseurenglish.net. Join us on social media. We can be found on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you for watching.
After the triumph of the revolution in Cuba, childhood has taken on an unparalleled social space. Documentaries Telesur presents a children's theater company opens a window for the participation of the little ones. La Colmenita, Sons and Dreams. Premiere Sunday, only on Telesur. Follow the most important global events through a comprehensive perspective.